I feel like anyone who's taken an interest in looking at art from a critical lens always has something special that comes along and manages to remind them why they fell in love with that medium in the first place. Something that snaps them out of that algorithm of analyzing the things we consume in a way that's almost second nature. But there's another thing that must be taken into account when discussing animation in particular. As a wise Anton Ego once said, there are times when a critic truly risks something, and that is the discovery and the defense of the new. I think more than any other art form, we yearn for animation that can stand toe-to-toe with the films that we've grown up with and solidified our passion for it. It's easy to express sentiments to the tune of Pixar losing their touch or Illumination only caring about money, but in my eyes, it's an even more difficult task to acknowledge that piece of art that makes its way into your life and proves you wrong. That modern art can stand the test of time as much as what came before, and I think I might have finally found that movie. It's the one with the trans shark.
Go, you.
But I'm not a girl. I'm a shark.
Yes, The Last Breath of Life from Blue Sky has ended up being my favorite film of 2023 so far, and one of my favorite animated movies of all time. Some brief context for anyone who's unfamiliar with the production behind this movie. Back before Blue Sky got shut down in 2021, they had another movie planned to come out called Nimona, but it was eventually swept up and revived by Netflix and directed by Nick Bruno, the animation supervisor of Peanuts movie and the director of what's technically their final film, Spies in Disguise. I didn't really know what to expect from this film considering Netflix being hit or miss in terms of their original projects, and Spies in Disguise was only a 6 out of 10 for me, so Bruno being the director was something I didn't have all that much of an opinion on, so I went in just hoping to be surprised. Before I get into all my thoughts though, I do need to acknowledge that this film is an adaptation of a graphic novel that I haven't read, so I can't fully judge it from that perspective. Lucky for me, I know someone who can. Say hello to my good friend and fellow YouTuber Bustercore. They edited a couple of segments in my Owl House ranking, by the way. That's where the Kamen Rider references came from.
Hey fellas, I'm Buster of the Buster Corp. I do analysis on whatever I'm interested in, which includes comics. So my buddy Yensid asked me to talk about how the original Nimona comic compares to the shiny new animated feature. So let's discuss. Nimona is a pretty fun comic that translated exceptionally well to an animated feature. Since the comic was published chapter by chapter like a serial, that format wouldn't work well for a feature film, so they do streamline the story through cuts and characterization changes. For example, in the movie, Ballister is more of a cowardly voice of reason rather than the stick of the mud he was in the comic. These changes were well implemented, and in exchange, the film expands on the unique sci-fi fantasy world and provides a more visually exciting experience that still captures the core themes and characters of the story exceptionally well.
The plot of this movie is Ballister being on the run after being framed for killing Queen Valoran the day he's officially made a knight, being the first commoner to do so. Now he and Nimona have to work together to prove his innocence and do some light ass-kicking in the process. It lends itself well to a very strong mystery where the tension and stakes remain high and suspense is present as the film gradually starts to reveal what's really going on. The cast of this movie is pretty small, but it still works given the 3-dimension and entertainment value all the characters have. And the setup makes for so much interesting exploration of the characters, including a really compelling love story between Ball and Ambrosius. Yeah, an animated movie was able to portray a gay couple on screen without any executive interference.
Speaking of gay shit, Ballister and his lover slash rival slash lover again, Eugene, are a fun couple despite both of them trying to murder each other, but hey, sometimes you need a bit of a murder to spice up a relationship. Very glad that their complicated but ultimately positive relationship can shine through for those who need it.
As captivating as I found their dance of deception to be, with them being torn apart due to circumstances outside of their control, the person who really managed to steal the show for me was the titular character. Between her anarchist worldview, the confidence she has in her abilities, and the enthusiasm she has towards being Ball's sidekick, it's genuinely the most fun I've had with a character in ages. I typically find this archetype to be annoying, but she managed to counteract that with how enduring her connection with Ball is and how funny she is on her own. And she takes full advantage of her powers in every scenario with all the different animals she can turn into, making for so many moments that had me cackling and crying tears of joy in some cases. I also really vibe with the animation style that they went with. It's no Spider-Verse in terms of eye candy, but I still think it's very unique and adds to the futuristic high-tech atmosphere of the setting, blending it with traditional fantasy elements like knights and dragons. And while it's a style I can definitely see not working for everyone, I was mostly on board with it, especially with how visually smooth the action sequences and Nimona's transitions were. It really feels like a high-definition video game, but in a good way. It makes the main character's external journey throughout the movie very very engaging because of how limitless it feels, which is also elevated by how tight the world building is. There's a reveal towards the ending about Nimona's true identity, and it fits into the established lore so naturally, but this is where I'm gonna start talking spoilers. So around the halfway mark, it's revealed that the director, Bal's mentor as he trained to become a knight, was the one responsible for the queen's death after she rigged a weapon to go off and swapped it when Bal wasn't looking. And this is where the movie really starts to solidify its thematic excellence. The person who's unwilling to adapt to the idea of serving the kingdom going beyond the elites is terrifying to her. And this makes her serve as a significant threat simply on the basis of her position of power and influence. I expressed a similar sentiment about Alexander Pierce when talking about my favorite MCU villains, but I think it's done even more effectively in this film given the circumstances. Bal was the first of his kind in a lot of ways, an inspirational story about someone defying the odds and working his way up from poverty to achieve his dream of becoming a knight. The fact that a feat like this is established to be so uncommon makes the entire kingdom turning against him so quickly a very realistic turn of events given his raised expectations. Would there have been more leeway or room for reasonable doubt if Ambrosius was in this position? There's no way to be certain, but it's definitely possible. The film definitely could have taken the easy way out once it's revealed to the public that she's responsible for everything. Though they did rip off the way it happens from Zootopia, and I think that movie does it just a little bit better. But Zootopia doesn't have any sharks, so it balances everything out. But to my surprise, the film doesn't end on that note. Right after the video of the director's confession goes viral, in a montage that is unironically one of the best sequences ever put to film, you can literally argue with the wall. It's a dancing shark with sunglasses. Leave me alone. Anyway, she formulates a plan on the basis of Nimona's identity as the great black monster depicted in legend. Bal is working with the beast slayed by Glorith, and she took on her form to deflect the blame on the true enemy. This all stems from her paranoia about the slightest shift in the world order that she believes has allowed them to survive as a society for all these years. The cracks in the walls would allow for the monsters to work their way in. But you know who serves as a deconstruction of that myth? Nimona. This movie is hardly subtle in its representation of societal stigmatization and how it can isolate people from society. Nimona is confident in who she is, but no one outside of Bal is willing to see her outside of that. They just see the monster and not a person. A person filled to the brim with so much love and personality that is shunned because of the aesthetic of danger that people have assigned to her out of fear. And she's able to mask how this affects her up until Bal, the very first person who warms up to her, accuses her of using him and making the world see him as a villain. Even he is influenced by the director's allegations through Ambrosius because of how convinced he is that he's doing the right thing. And this sends her into a downward spiral given the sense of betrayal that comes from the one person she thought was like her before he realizes the error of his discernment and stops her from taking her own life, which was foreshadowed through this line of dialogue.
I don't know what's scarier. The fact that everyone in this kingdom wants to run a sword through my heart. Or that sometimes I just want to let them.
And well, I think Buster is the best person to have this come from.
As a gender-fluid fellow myself, I love how the story explores gender identity through Nimonia's shapeshifting, both for cute visual gags and emotional moments, really showing the spectrum of dysphoria and euphoria that comes with discovering yourself, which is fitting, as the story did help N.D. Stevenson, the author, discover himself. Nimonia's experiences are a really cool allegory of the obstacles LGBTQ+ people face in terms of trying to pass as a girl or boy or non-binary or whatever gender identity they choose. It's really cool how there's multiple elements of the queer experiences that isn't just limited to just relationships.
Toward the end of the film, when Ambrosius and the other knights uncover the truth, the director insists that this is how things have always been, and remains steadfast in her belief that disrupting the order will only lead to chaos. And he simply responds with, "What if we've always been wrong?" The illusion of peace was built on the irrational fear of Nimona's powers, cultivating a narrative of the people of the kingdom needing to fight back. It's become embedded in every aspect of their lives. Could Nimona spend her entire life presenting as a teenage girl and not turn into a shark as a way of preventing this? Probably, but it's important to note that it's a core part of how she expresses herself to the world, and adhering to these standards would mean she'd be living as a shell of herself. And that's a survival mechanism that shouldn't be forced onto anyone, especially not a child. And even though Bal isn't initially able to understand her on that level, he was able to see her for who she is after losing everything and being on the opposite end of things, recognizing that he can't turn a blind eye and look at things from an individualistic perspective anymore, or go back to the life he had aspired to reach for so long, even if it means potentially coming at the cost of his romantic partner. More than any other film that I've seen tackle these concepts, this movie gets it done so right. Oftentimes, interference with the status quo is essential to evoking substantial societal change in order to create a safer and more equitable world for everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Nimona deserves a chance at happiness just as much as everyone else, and it's through her defeat of the director that she's able to finally be seen through her sacrifice. For as much as I miss Blue Sky and wish they had a longer opportunity to improve as a studio, I don't think that any movie to come out of under the Disney umbrella could be this unfiltered in terms of everything it accomplishes. And I mean it when I say that this movie soars in every aspect. The animation is unique and allows for an engaging exploration of this intricately put together world, plus some incredibly fun action sequences. The story never once feels exposition heavy, and it paces its mystery elements and relationship progressions perfectly. Its limited cast of characters works wonders given how charming and three-dimensional they all are. It's the most I've laughed at any movie period in a long time, and its themes about pushing past differences and our strengths lying with each other, while also accurately portraying the effects of systemic oppression, are ones that I haven't seen conveyed this masterfully in any animated movie before. Barely anything feels sugar-coated in this regard, and yet its depth hardly stops there, and how it depicts the loneliness and fear both of the two leads feel before they find solace with each other. And this movie did one thing that I need to address before wrapping things up. In the end credits, there's a heading that simply reads Blue Sky Studios, listing all of the talented creatives and artists who had the vision to bring this film to life, showing just how much reverence this new team had for every single one of them. They didn't have to do that, but they went ahead and did it anyway.
Overall, I'd recommend both the comic and the movie for Nimona, as they each succeed at similar things, but in different ways. Though rip purple-haired Nimona from the comic, SMH, it was her best look.
I'm overjoyed to see so many people talking about how amazing this movie is, and I really hope that this video encourages you to seek it out if you haven't already. With all that being said, it is with great pleasure that I give this bold, risky, intelligent, beautiful final swan song that I hope will be revered for years to come, this channel's very first official 10 out of 10.